Welcome to selfdiscoveryradio.com, where the orchard of wisdom is just ready for picking. We celebrate your why, the journey that you've taken that inspires someone else. We support your services, we support your story. Come and be our guest, become a host, be an author with us. Come and see what we've got. Our next show is... Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of The Author's Kiss. I have a wonderful author with me here today who wrote a book back in 1990 that is so relevant today and will be for many, many more years to come. It's called The Missing Piece by Boughton. He's written other books, which we're going to be talking about. I've only read mostly The Missing Piece, and it was a wonderful reminder for me along the way, the little confirmation and, oh yes, that's how I used to look at things, this is how I see it now, that little nudge into seeing things in a different perspective, because we're inclined to go back to an old loop of thinking, and then that little nudge comes along and goes, you know what, don't go off track. Get back on track. And it's a beautiful story. It's one that you really can gift to anyone. It is metaphorically wonderfully parallel to all of our lives. And that missing piece in our life, which is part of the story, which I really, Bud will tell us about. But it's also, we're all looking for that missing piece in our life. We all think that our puzzle isn't put together. What's missing? And maybe if everything was put together, we'd become complacent and think we've done it all. Maybe that missing piece is something we're constantly in search of, and that keeps us inquisitive and investigative and adventurous as we are meant to be as human beings. So let's dive into not only The Missing Piece, but his other books, and just share how this came about, but also the profoundness of it. So welcome to the show, Bud.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And gosh, I'm not sure what I'm going to say now, because you've explained the book perfectly. It is very much a book that when I wrote it, I didn't want to make people think that I thought for some reason that I have all the answers, but instead I wanted to ask questions that they would reflect on. And interestingly, as you talked about your perception as you read the book, some of those things you've thought about before, but it brought you back to those same issues today, and how as we go through life changes, our perspectives change, and that keeps the book relevant, which is one of the things I'm so happy with the book, that there are still people that read it and come back to me and say, geez, Bud, this book really spoke to my heart. So thank you very much for having me here today.
Oh, my pleasure. It's also kind of a reread book. You may not read it from cover to cover, but very often I will simply go to a book and I know it's got a message for me today, and I'll open it. And wherever it is on that page is some knowledge I am needing today. It's just that little nudge, that little reminder, that little kind of putting you back on track. And, this is that kind of book where you can read a passage from pretty well. I mean, you really do need to read that first chapter to actually understand what that missing piece is. But, from there's so many nuggets of the individual information that it's not one of these things you've got to go back and read it from, cover to cover again, although I go ahead and do so. But it is a book that you can definitely open up and just receive some information that is probably going to be very relevant to what you're looking for in the now.
Well, it's interesting. I recently have been ordained to do marriage ceremonies. I had some friends approach me and said, will you marry me? And I said, my goodness, I don't know if I'm qualified, but I found out I could get ordained through American Marriage Ministry. So lo and behold, here I'm going to be the officiant at their wedding. But what I did is we met a few times and I gave them a copy of The Missing Piece. And I said, look, I'm not asking you to read the whole book, but if you do look at chapter 6, the title of that is Our Search for Security Through Marriage. And it might be a good chapter for you guys just to read, and then we can come back together and discuss the content. And to your point exactly, that's just what they did. But interestingly, the groom already came back to me and said, Bud, after I read that one chapter, I went back to the beginning and I started reading the whole book because
Yeah.
that chapter asked some very good questions and some things that my bride and I need to discuss. So,
Right.
to your point, you can take in that whole part 2, which consists of 8 different chapters, it talks about even the beginning, the security blanket that we grow up with. Is there such a thing in our life? All the different things that we do to try and grab that security in the workplace, financial security, relationships, marriage, the things we do.
Yes.
So to your point, somebody can pick up this book and maybe read just that section.
Exactly.
And it speaks to them.
Yeah, I'm going to show the book here. Obviously, anybody listening to
Okay.
the audio isn't going to see it. You're going to see it on the posting instead. Very simple, very clean. And I think that's the way that you've actually approached the book. You kept it very simple, very across the board. It doesn't matter what a person's religion is or background is or ethnicity is that you've kept it very relevant to the situation of being a human being. Without putting all of the other stuff into it, is that we're all human beings, no matter what vessel we're in or where we come from or what our faith is. And we all have the same issues that we face in life. And we're going to react to them in a different way. And I think what you do is you bring things back in a very common sense approach to everything. And so it doesn't matter who you are or where you're coming from. You could read this and just simply get, aha, okay, back to the core. And I think that's what it is. It's like that rubber band thing, pulling us back to the core, which is something we forget to do, don't we? We're so busy chasing life. We forget sometimes we just need to go back to the root of something to actually understand it.
Well, and you know what? I think when I decided to write the book, I had been chasing life, as you described. I was a young man, married, 2 children, living in suburbia, beautiful home, active in our church, active in PTA, the boys doing well in school. As a therapist would say, we had the picture. Right. We had just what you try to get to in life.
The poster life, yep.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, strangely, my wife decided she wanted to take her life in a different direction, and she wanted a divorce. And very candidly, I was a train wreck. I lost 17 pounds in 30 days. I could not picture the fact that I'm going to go through life, and now the thing that was most important to me, my family, was going to be gone. And I started to think about it. This was back in the late 70s. And I said, geez, when I was a kid growing up in the late 50s, early 60s, none of my friends' parents got divorced. Oh. But yet here I was in the late 70s, and I said, yeah, that's happening to a lot of people. I'm not the Lone Ranger here. This is happening to other people. Then I thought, geez, when I was a kid growing up, everybody's dad seemed to work for the same company for 20, 25, 30 years.
Yes.
They didn't move around a lot. And when they retired, they got a gold watch and a pension, and life was very plain and simple. And yet here I was in the late 70s, downsizings, right sizings. Nobody had security in the workplace. And then on top of it, I even thought about the simplest things in our lives, Sara, like family dinner. Right. When I'm a kid growing up, I'm playing out in the street, playing ball with my buddies. My mom calls me home at 5:30, says, hey, dinner time. You come in, you wash your hands, you sit down with mom and dad, your siblings are with you, the television is turned off, there's no cell phones, and we have dinner together and reconnect as a family. And yet, when I was writing this book or having this thought process, I'd look at a McDonald's drive-thru, here's mom on a cell phone handing burgers and fries into the back seat, and I'd say, my gosh, we don't even have family dinner together anymore. So I just started to ask myself, if we've lost some of those most fundamental things in our lives, security in our marriages, security in the workplace, security just in our family unit, so to speak, where are we going to find our security? And that's when I made the decision, hey, I'm going to try to write a book about this.
Right.
Just ask a lot of questions. And that's how it got its beginnings.
Well, I always call that the redirect. The best things come out of people when they've had a little bit of a cosmic two by four, and that sent them on a different direction.
Sure.
And basically, you've gone down the direction that you needed to go down, not only for your own life, but for your meaningful purpose that now serves other people. And we're inclined to look at those redirects as catastrophic, the end of times, and
Sure. Sure.
how are we going to deal with it? And the initial reaction is quite valid. Your life has just been turned upside down, and now you're faced with, was everything a lie? And where am
Yeah.
I going from now? And you're going to go and ask those questions. And you know what? That's a grieving process. It's a process, but it is a process you're meant to go through and not get stuck in. And this is where, going to the book is very good. As I say, is that common sense approach to things, and the way to look at something is that the big question we ask when anything happens to us is, why me?
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, sometimes
Sure.
it's out of your hands, and sometimes it's meant to be, and sometimes, yes, it's something you did. But there's no point in analyzing yourself to death or persecuting yourself. It's just looking at it as for what it is, and what do you do now? And with a common sense approach to something, it's kind of the proverbial roll up your sleeves and deal with it.
Yeah. When I sat down and actually began the process of how am I going to write this book, I asked myself, how many different ways do we try to find security in our lives? I mean, kind of trying to get to that place, Sara, where you feel like you've got life figured out, you've got it tied up with a nice bow on it, everything's good, I'm financially secure, my bills are being paid, my relationships are healthy, I'm doing things that I enjoy doing, I love my job. And you know what? As much as we work to get to that place in all of those endeavors, there are no guarantees.
No.
There's none of it. I mean, even when we start as a child and your mom or dad tell you, you've got to get that education, and then high school, you got to get that college degree, and oh boy, today you need a master's or you need this. And you go to those graduation ceremonies and they're wonderful celebrations, but then you go out into the real world and guess what?
They're back
There's
at
no
McDonald's.
I mean, I've had great jobs in my career, and I've had some when I was really performing at a peak level. But because of corporate priorities, and shareholder value, and doing the right thing, I end up being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I lose my job.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yes.
And you just kind of ask yourself, like you say, geez, why me? Why did this happen? But you also understand that you've got to go on in life. And the one thing I would say about this book, and when you do get to the end of it, you'll clearly understand that. But remember at the end of the short story, the grandfather goes out and he's looking out on Mirror Lake and Lake Placid. He's had a wonderful day making a puzzle with his grandson, and there was a missing piece, and he turns that missing piece into a life lesson for his grandson. But he looks out on the lake and he says to himself, this has been a pretty good day and so forth. Maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would be even better. And I think that's what I wanted my book to be about. It's ironic. You and I are doing this podcast, webcast, whatever, on 9/11.
Yes.
And if you looked at the front of the book, as I completed this book and had it in manuscript form and was taking it out to publishers, trying to get somebody to publish it, all of a sudden 9/11 happened in 2001. And I said to myself, oh my God, the byline of my book is our search for security in an insecure world.
Right.
And I said, my gosh, am I going to have to rewrite the book or whatever? But as I went back through my content, I said, no, this book is about hope. It's about finding answers and getting to a point where you feel like in your life that I count for something. I have made a difference. There are people that love me, and there's people that I love. And you know what? That's where we have to get to in life. And isn't it interesting today, with all the social media, with all the issues that we're dealing with, that, my goodness, people are struggling with these same kind of issues that I was writing about back through the 90s when I was
Yes.
putting this book together.
But the thing is, it is the core. You know, you talked about the family values. You know, we didn't have the cell phones until the kids were much older, teenagers, and then that was just for
Sure.
me to keep tabs on them. It was a round table, and we sat at that table and we conversed about the day. No subject was off taboo. Many a time there was an extra kid. I always had tea when they came home from school and they brought home whoever. There was always snacks and things like this. And I was the safe haven. You know, kids used to, when they had problems at home, come to me, because they knew that we would talk about
Sure.
it. And that was the thing. They wanted to be heard. They were trying to work something out. They were being kind of punished for it. And they were feeling unheard. And I think this is what is a common denominator that runs through people's lives, is they feel unheard, or that nobody's willing to listen. And if they truly listened, maybe they would understand and help them figure it out. But as we're not listening to each other, because we're too busy, we're on the phone, we're doing this, we're doing that, and if it's not in 10 seconds, I haven't got the attention span for it, we're all feeling unheard. And we just need that conversation, because fundamentally we're all, doesn't matter who we are, from where in the world, we're all feeling the same thing. And we can all help each other become thrivers, not just survivors, thrivers, if we end
Sure.
up supporting one another. So yes, it's very relevant that it is that we're recording this today on 9/11, which is now 17 years later.
17 years.
Yes,
17
and
years.
you know, the repercussions of it will be felt for still generations to come. But the sad thing is that the resolution of war is still not there. There's still the feeding of the hate. There's still the feeding of the divide. There's still the feeding of insecurity. So your book is even more relevant right now, because I think people are feeling even more insecure right now, especially if they
Well,
aren't getting
and I
authenticity.
think that's very true, because when you think about it, as polarized as we are as a country, way to the right or way to the left, and having those feelings really are generated out of insecurity
Yes.
and fear and not understanding one another. And you made the point, and it's key. I do a lot of my background. I've done a lot of work in sales and marketing. I've worked for Xerox and IBM and Procter and Gamble in my career. So I've been with great companies that have real tradition and heritage in the sales process. But the one thing I've learned through it all is the best salespeople are the best listeners.
Yes.
It's not about getting out there and spewing your message.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's about asking the questions and listening. And that's where we fail in our relationships so many times. We're already thinking about what we need to say
Yes.
when that person is still talking. We need to take their input, their perspective and ideas and process them and then respond. And I'm a big believer in that listening point that
Yeah.
you just made mention of.
Yeah, well, you know, I believe inspiration is invitation. And I get people saying, well, why aren't your shows 15 minutes? Nobody's got the attention span for longer. And I said, then those that don't have the attention span for longer are not ready to hear the wisdom. If you cannot give an hour's listening to someone who's sharing their life experience, the wisdom, the tools, and the knowledge that they've gained, that they're now freely giving to you as to put in your backpack to travel with in life, if you don't have that kind of respect or that attention span to truly understand the nugget of information, I call this the Orchard of Wisdom library that we have here, because there's over 2,000 shows here on the network. And each one of those has been someone's journey, somebody who is now imparting the wisdom that will help you on your journey of life. But if you aren't willing to listen, how are you ever going to hear or get those tools? So I think a lot of it is in society is everybody's looking for the quick fix. We've been taught by the sales pitch. And the past
Yep.
paradigm is now, buy now, next, instant
Speed the market. Absolutely.
exactly, and sugar high, blah blah blah, get them all riled up. It doesn't matter if they crash, we've got something for that. And it isn't about take your time, savor the moment, chew the knowledge over. Is it something meaningful to me? Do I really need it? We've seen where consumerism has gone. Not only have we become the biggest polluters in this entire planet, we're killing our planet with our pollution. You can check that out on the Get Synced series under Eco Solutions.
Yeah.
But that consumerism has cost us our soul, our heart, and our spirit, because we're trying to buy our happiness. And we can't buy happiness, can we? It's something that we have to work for by going through the process of life.
Well, and I think about, talking earlier about chasing life and so forth. There's the one part in the book where I talked about security in the workplace and financial security and so forth. And I told the story about when I was a young boy, about 10 years old, which would put it back in 1961. I'll date myself on this. But I remember my dad.
Just a couple of years older than me. I'm a 50s student.
My dad standing at what we called the back porch. It was a concrete slab, 2 steps. It wasn't a big deck with a outdoor, umbrella and all that.
Or comfy chairs or anything like that.
A little hibachi grill there, and he's grilling his hamburgers, and he's got a frothy whiskey sour in his hand. And we're living in a house with 3 bedrooms, 1.5 bath. And there's 5 people living in that house, 3 boys growing up, and my mom and dad.
Yeah.
So very, very middle class by 1960 standards. And you know what? My dad, when I see him standing by that hibachi, he always had a smile on his face. He felt like he had it all. And you know what? No wonder, because he'd lived through World War II.
Right.
When he was a little boy and was born, he lived through the Depression of the 30s. He saw where the world had been in a very negative way. So for him to have a home, a family, 3 healthy boys, and money to feed his family and do what he did, he felt like life was great. Now, fast forward, I'm a senior vice president of a company. I'm standing by my gas grill by the pool, which is screened in Florida. And I'm there I'm cooking steaks on the grill for the family, but I can't even enjoy the moment because I'm caught up in a thought process that says, geez, we've got the board meeting coming Thursday. I've got to prepare a report for that. And I've got a proposal going out Tuesday. So I've got to work on that at the same time. And oh, by the way, we need to hire 2 new salespeople. So I had so much going on, Sarah, that in that moment, I couldn't enjoy it the way I should have been able to.
Right.
But as we get older in life, we clearly understand that those moments are really what life is all about. So I've got now my 2 sons who are adults, and I have 4 stepsons that I'm in a second marriage. Those 6 boys, I am constantly trying to impart on them. Enjoy the moment you're in, because that's where you're at. And you know what? We don't have any guarantees beyond that. It's also interesting. We're doing this discussion about a book that was originally published 16 years ago, but had its roots 10 years before that. And today we're dealing with a huge issue with our adolescents around suicide.
Yes.
Here in Indiana, where I live, there's a statistic that has gone out that says 1 in 5 high school students, 1 in 5, that's 20%, have either thought about, contemplated, or considered suicide. And those are kids that are 15, 16, 17 years old. Now, you don't go there unless you don't see hope in the future, or you don't have a perspective that says life is okay. I know I've got some problems now, but those problems, they need to understand they're temporary. You're going to move through those, and you'll learn from the experiences, and life will take you other places. And that's a huge problem. Now, here I am, I'm 67. I've had, I think, a wonderful life with good times and bad. I've seen some mountaintops, and I can tell you I've been in the valleys. You know that. But you know what? We need to help the young people today understand that you're going to take care of things and you'll progress through these. And there are solutions. And many of those solutions aren't all the stuff out here. It's the stuff inside us.
100%.
And that's when we get to the third part of the book.
Yeah.
The other missing piece, spelled Peace. That's where there's truly, I think, some wisdom that I was handed down to me by other people that really makes the book worth reading for anybody at any age.
Well, you know, I mean, the gift is in the present, right? The present, the now.
Sure.
We've forgotten how to live in the now. We're so busy worrying about tomorrow, the what ifs. We're bombarded by media and negativity. We're looking at a world where we really don't know if somebody's going to push a button and blow us all up. You know, I call it the CNN effect. They'll take a pimple and make it a volcanic eruption. And they've got people on high alert the whole time. And the stress factor, especially in Western society, especially in North America, is so high that people are getting dis-ease because of it. And we're seeing health epidemics on depression and anxiety magnitude. I've done quite a number of shows on mental health and on post-traumatic stress, which is not just for veterans, but on depression and anxiety. And it's stress is the number one killer because it brings about all these other diseases. And we've got to look at this why, as you say, they don't see any hope. They don't see any purpose in living beyond now. They don't see anything in the now. All they see is all the things of reasons of not to live. My own daughter is getting married next month, and I'm saying, oh, you know, and I look forward to the grandkids. I don't think I'm going to bring a kid into this world. This world is too awful. And it's awful that she's thinking that way. And I said, but what if with the love that you give your kid is the difference to change the tide? And it can't see that. All she sees is all the bad things that we do to one another. And yes, I think this is something we need to look at. And we also need to go, quite simply, and say, stop it. Stop it. Why are we the only species on this planet that hurts one another in such a magnitude way? And the reason why is that it comes from our own inner pain, a lack of inner love. We are not centered. We don't come from the core. We don't work from the heart. We don't listen to the soul. We're not listening. We're not living in our spirit. And we're not living in the gratitude of what life can really be. All we're doing is focusing on what we don't have and not realizing everything we want and everything we have lies within us. So the journey isn't outside, it's inside. And when you take the inside journey, your outside journey will have a much smoother ride.
Well, and as you went through those 8 chapters in the second part of my book, all of those things that relate to whether it's security in the workplace or financial security, security through marriage, through other relationships, security through the individual activities that we participate in, all of these things, we try to give our life meaning, but we're doing it thinking about us. We're thinking about outcomes that impact ourselves. When you get to the third part of the book and talk about the other missing piece, you really talk about activities that are impacting other people. You're talking about giving. You're talking about forgiving. You're talking about having a spiritual foundation in your life that guides you and says, hey, it's about serving others. That's what this life is about. And if we can get people,
That's the one I turn to. The need for spiritual foundation in one's life. Yep.
Right. If we can get there, then suddenly people start to see their lives differently. Everybody has a chance to make a difference. And no, it doesn't mean you're going to be a Nobel Peace Prize winner or you're going to be president of the United States or that stuff. You don't have to be there to make that difference. You can be somebody that's walking through the parking lot. You see an elderly couple trying to load their groceries into their car and they're having difficulty. Go help them out. Smile. You know, that sort of thing. But those are such simple little random acts of kindness that we all can do. And how many times do we miss those opportunities because we're like you say, we're on to the next thing.
Right.
We got to go get in the
Or
car.
our
And we
head
got
down is in our own misery. We're not paying attention. I want to just read the first little paragraph here because that's funny enough. As you mentioned it, as I said, just turned to a chapter, and it was the need for spiritual foundation in one's life. And you're saying,
Okay.
clearly, when we choose to give ourselves, choose is a big word here, to give more of ourselves to others and carry a forgiving spirit in our hearts, we begin to transform our lives and change who we are in a very positive way. However, we are still missing one essential component that each of us must have if we are ever truly to find our missing piece. Let's look at those components. I think one of the things most certainly that we're missing a great deal in life is coming from the heart. You know, somehow my heart's been wounded, or I don't want to be hurt. I'm not going to show my heart. And we forget kindness is heartfelt. Caring is heartfelt. Expressing a smile, doing a good deed, boosting somebody else is coming from the heart. And all of those little things that you start doing in coming from the heart, you will start feeling that glow of warmth within you and want more of the heart because it feels better.
Yeah. Oh, it actually, you end up getting more by doing something for something else. The feelings that return are, that's everything. And ironically, you mentioned, from the heart, as you and I have discussed, I have 2 other books. My third book is called Coaching is Teaching at Its Best. And one of the chapters in there, I talk about coaching the heart. And what I'm saying is, I don't care what sport it is you coach, football, baseball, basketball, hockey, it makes no difference. At the end of the day, you teach a lot of skills related to how to play that game more effectively that hopefully help you be a better team, and ultimately you win your games. That's great. But in the big picture of life and the scope of what we're trying to do as coaches is to be the best teachers we can be. And one of the things we need to teach young people is by our own actions, by how we coach and teach, we need to coach from the heart.
Yes.
And let me give you a great example. There's a guy named Joe Ehrman who played in the National Football League years ago for the then Baltimore Colts. He now lives in the Baltimore area, is an ordained Methodist minister. He teaches at a school, but he has a rule with their football team that if you ever go into lunch in the cafeteria and go to sit down with your buddies and you see somebody sitting by themselves at a table, you either go over and invite them to sit at your table with your friends, or you go sit with them. And it's all about being more inclusive, and building relationships with other people. So that kid may look a little different. He may dress differently. He may come from a place where he has a funny accent. That makes no difference. Go invite him into your life and build a relationship, have a new friendship, learn from the individual. And those are the things that we need to be teaching young people today to help them build a better world going forward.
This is a tool. The computer is a tool. The phone and everything else is a tool. It's a way to contact people and say, let's meet, so we can put our phones down and converse with one another, not sit opposite each other and play games or text, right? That is a tool. It is an invitation. It is a communication, right? Do not misconstrue it as the conversation.
Yeah.
We've forgotten that art, haven't we?
We've all seen it, Sarah.
Yes, I know.
You go into a restaurant and there'll be 4 people, sometimes even a family. The mom and dad is there too, and all 4 of them have their cell phones out.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that's a rule that when you sit down at a meal with friends or minutes right now, check our messages, make sure we haven't missed anything. Bingo, we're done at 3 minutes. The phones we put down. Now let's enjoy our meal and converse with one another.
Right. Exactly. I
Somehow
mean, that's
you've got to learn to establish those kind of rules
boundaries.
and guidelines
Yeah.
if you're going to use those tools effectively.
Right.
Otherwise, they become a burden. They become
You know,
a burden. They're an
everybody's talking
addiction
about
today. That's a
exactly.
whole other issue
Oh,
for
yes.
young
Oh,
people
yes.
today, is they are truly addicted
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, we've done shows on social media addiction and on, you know, apparatus addiction, and you know, we've got to understand that addiction is just purely a replacement for something missing inside of you. And again, we have to go back to the core, got to go back inside to find out what's missing and why we're becoming so addictive and so needy over something. But I think I'm living with an 85-year-old woman right now. She's 5 foot dot. She's a black belt. She's as feisty as hell. She still works, you know, and you know, you listen to her stories, you know, things that she's done, and she still challenges his people. You know, if they make a remark to her, she gives them the look and go, you know, bring it on. And they're so scared by it. You know, she's 5 foot dot. But
that's great.
and she's got such a wonderful attitude, which I love. And you know, I've interviewed people here from 9 to 85, and when you look at the 9-year-old who wrote a book about 365 days of gratitude with a positive attitude. And the thing is, what was a reminder, you know, I thought I'm going to have to change the way I do this interview. And it was her first interview. Since then, she's literally gone around the world doing the circuit. And she's just so simple. Well, if you're doing something you don't like, stop it and do something you do like. And, you know, we forget we have choices. If we are in something we don't like, don't sit there and moan and bitch and groan about it. Do something about it. Change your direction. Get up and go somewhere else. Do something else. Why have we stepped into the drama and the trauma of life instead of willing to feed the joy, you know, and the love and the gratitude?
You know, kind of going back to the book a little bit, I've had people ask me, you know, geez, the short story at the beginning, how did you come up with that and then build a whole book around it? I said, I didn't. I was really working on the 8 chapters of the book. And one day I just got this idea, hey, I'm going to write a short story about this little boy and his grandfather. I had taken a trip to Lake Placid, New York, and that was such a beautiful environment I had never been in. So that's where I made them, and that's where I put his grandfather's kind of cabin right there at Lake Placid. And you know what? I actually was probably 5 years into writing this book when I came up with the idea for this short story. And interestingly, for many of the people that have read the book, they've mentioned to me, you've used the word several times, simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
What was more simple than a grandfather and a grandson sitting in a warm, cozy cabin on a rainy, ugly October kind of afternoon, working on a jigsaw puzzle together?
Yeah.
It gave them a chance to have conversation, for the 10-year-old little boy to learn some things or ponder some things about his grandfather that he didn't know. Of course, as there's mention in there, the grandfather tragically had lost his partner in life, his wife, and so forth. And some of the things that I put into that story, people have asked me, geez, were you Billy or were you the grandfather? I said, I made those characters up, but you know what? I think I'd like to be a little bit of both of them.
Exactly.
I like the little boy.
Yes.
And I'd like the grandfather, but interestingly, it's a pretty simple story. And then when there was one piece missing from the puzzle, how the grandfather took that moment to say, no, you know what? The little boy was upset. He wanted to finish the puzzle. He goes, we can't finish it if we don't have that piece. And yet the grandfather said, no, I think that missing piece is trying to teach us a lesson. And he turned the negative into a positive.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, if you go back to the book, and I've pointed this out to people when I've done some book readings and so forth, but the book actually begins with 3 words. The little boy, 10 years old, saying, this was terrible. This was terrible. I mean, the story starts out on this negative note where everything they'd planned to go out in the boat together, to do hiking there in the mountains, that everything he was going to do, had gone away because the weather was so crappy outside.
Right.
And the little boy sees that as just this huge negative. The grandfather has the wisdom to take the negative and say, no, this is going to be one of the best days we've ever had.
Right.
And when
Create
you
a new
do get to,
opportunity. That's it, right? Just
yeah,
one
and
door
when you
closes,
get to
open
the
another.
very end, when you get to the epilogue, Sarah,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see that little boy has grown up to be about a 33, 35-year-old man, and he's doing something that ties all the way back to that day with his grandfather as they made the puzzle. So it kind of ties up the book in a nice way. And I've had more people that have read the book said to me, boy, I really love the epilogue because of how it connected all the way back to the beginning.
Right.
And as you remember in the 8 chapters in part 2, like when we talked about financial security, what does it really buy? I start out at the beginning and say, we really don't know what the grandfather did for a living. We don't know how much money he made or this or that. But if we really look at him in the story, boy, he seemed like a pretty cool grandfather. He was willing to have fun with Billy and do neat things. And so in every chapter, how I was able to bring those characters back into it and then put them into the epilogue, once again, it makes it for a pretty entertaining read while you're asking yourself a lot of these questions we've been talking about.
It's the thread, you know, because people want to know there's a thread in life. When we're looking at it, we're weaving our blanket of life. And, you know, that sometimes there's a missing thread or a thread that's being pulled, but we're always looking for that continuum of that thread. You know, that's going to be that last stitch in life. You know, what blanket are we leaving for others? Are they going to look at it and say a life well lived, a life, you know, well contributed? This is, you know, a person that I want to remember for what they stood for. I mean, ultimately, it's not about your wealth. It's not about your status. It's not about your followers. It's about who you are as a person. It's about your contribution. And your contribution isn't, you know, I donated millions of dollars or I did this, I did that. Your contribution is who are you as a human being? And how did you contribute yourself? Not your action, you know, not, people are doing for the sake of doing. They're not being. And when you actually step into your beingness, whatever you do has so much more impact. So
I mean, it is so true. And I think about it, as you mentioned that, the one nugget that I have in the book was, I'd read before, when Andrew Carnegie died, there was a news reporter that asked, geez, how much did he leave? Meaning, what sort of wealth did he attain? How much did he leave? And the answer the journalist got was, he left it all. That's right. When we leave this world, we leave it all. We come into this world with nothing, and we leave with nothing. Right. So the big home, the sports car, whatever those things that we chase sometimes in life.
Right.
At the end of the day,
you know, but also the leaving it all. Forget about the material things.
Sure.
You know, my legacy is this radio TV station. The wisdom that I have here, over 2,000 shows of collective wisdom from between myself and my hosts from people around the world. Nuggets, knowledge, inspiration, tools, wisdom. I mean, the magnitude of knowledge that is here on this little station. And, you know, I'm hoping to be around for a while longer and to continue this and expand even more. And what did I leave? I left you a complete orchard of wisdom. And it's abundant. What you do with it, though, how it enriches your life. And that's the thing with Carnegie or with anyone else. The enrichment of what they did, what they left us, is the fuel for our own enrichment. And that's right. That's really what we want. Your book will live way on beyond you, and it will still be relevant 20, 30 years from now. And, you know, somebody will read it and it will be a passage they're going through in life and it will speak to them. And that's the thing, is having timeless pieces that it doesn't matter which generation reads it or listens to it, it relates to them in their now. And because of the wisdom shared, it becomes their guiding tool to their future. So let's talk about it.
Go ahead. Go
No, I was
ahead.
going to say, ask about the other two books and
Oh,
what they're about and where you're taking us with them.
okay, great. My second book was entitled Dad's Last Letter, Leadership Principles for the Next Generation. And what this is about is I have been through my corporate life through a lot of leadership training programs, management training programs, etc. And one day I just got this idea. I said, who are the people that have impacted my life the most? And I started writing their names down. And of course, my mom and dad were at the top of the list. But then I went down through, there were some coaches, some school teachers, a couple ministers. And then next to each name, I said, well, what was it about them that made them so special to me as mentors, as leaders? So I started to write some personal characteristics. And when I was done with that, if you can imagine, it kind of looked like a manual Excel spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
But all of a sudden I said, my goodness, look at this. I circled all of these people had this trait. And 7 of them had this trait, and 7 more had this trait. And I came up with 4 principles that suddenly I said, those are foundational to character-based leadership. So I had those 4 principles. Now I said, okay, I want to write a book about this, but how do I write a book? I don't want to write another how to be a leader kind of book.
Right.
So I wrote a story. It's a short novel. It's 105 pages. Most businessmen read it in one airplane flight. But interestingly, it's about a gentleman who goes to the doctor. This guy's been losing weight. His health is failing a little bit. He knows he's not right. He goes to the doctor who was his best friend in high school. And his best friend looks at him and says, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're terminally ill. You've got pancreatic cancer. There's nothing much we can do. And then to go one step further, he says to this gentleman, and don't ask me how I know this, but my wife and I, we sat at the kitchen table and prayed for you last night. And I now know you will be dead in 24 hours. You're going to die in the next 24 hours. And of course, this guy blows up and screams at his friend, says, well, you're a heck of a doctor. I came here for help. Now you tell me I'm going to be dead in 24 hours. But now the gentleman's faced with, what do I do in those 24 hours? And he's divorced. He's estranged from his children. He's kind of on his own. First thing he does is go to a bar. And all I will tell you is he has an encounter on the way to the bar that is suddenly changes everything. And he goes home and decides he's going to write a letter to his 2 sons explaining or putting in the letter those 4 principles, why they're important, why they should live their life by those principles, and how he failed as their dad in doing so. Mm-hmm. There's a strange twist at the end. I will tell you the book was 5 stars on Amazon and has sold a number of copies, and I've gotten all sorts of feedback from it as well. But that was Dad's Last Letter, Leadership Principles for the Next Generation. And my latest book is a book I'm very, oh, by the way, I can hold up. There's Dad's Last Letter.
Right.
So you can see that cover. And my latest book is called Coaching is Teaching at Its Best. Mm-hmm. I currently, in my semi-retirement, so to speak, I help coach an NCAA Division III college football team here in Indiana. I'm also their team chaplain, so I do our game day chapel services. But over the years, being around many good football coaches and coaches in other sports, I've learned a lot of things, but there was one guy that changed my career in business and in coaching back in 1974. I asked him, if you could give me one piece of advice, what would it be? And he said, well, I'll tell you this, you have to always remember coaching is teaching at its best. And I said, geez, I like the sound of that, but I'm not sure I understand. And he went on to explain that simple philosophy and why coaching really is teaching at its best. And I said, boy, I love that. And you know what, Sarah, that has been with me in my professional life, in business. It's helped me in coaching. But since then, I have worked with a lot of youth coaches. I officiate hockey and lacrosse. So I get to see youth coaches coaching their players. And I decided there were 10 tips that I could provide those youth coaches that would help them better understand this philosophy. Coaching is teaching at its best. So that is a short paperback 72-page book. And it has gotten great reviews from college coaches, high school coaches, parents of kids that have kids in youth sports. I have one local athletic association, a junior athletic association. Their executive director read the book and he came back and bought 100 copies, and they are now giving every youth coach in every sport a copy of the book.
Excellent.
And they have me come talk to them about it. So that's my third book. It's one that I'm very passionate about because it impacts the quality of the experience for all these kids that are participating in youth sports. And the other thing that I'd say, Sara, it's kind of funny when you're an author, you write your book and sometimes you give a book to somebody and they, oh gosh, this is really neat, a signed copy, and they enjoy it. But you know what? The book is just the book. You have to read the book.
Yes.
And the gentleman that I had given this latest book to, I had a lunch with him about 3 months after I gave him the book. And I said to him, geez, have you read the book? And he said, well, no, I'm embarrassed. No, I haven't really. I said, now, doggone it. You and I are good friends. I'm going to text message you every morning. And all I want you to do is read. You read that, the philosophy, the first day. And after that, read one tip a day. And in 11 days, you will have read the whole book. 5 days later, he came back to me. He said, Bud, don't need the text messages. I've already finished the book. And he's the guy that bought 100 copies for all those other coaches. So
Right.
All I would say to all your listeners out there, people watching this, when you do have a book, don't let it sit on the book
Right.
and just collect dust. Get into the book
Yes.
and read it, because that's how you really benefit.
Right.
When you have these books.
And again, every single one of these books is one of these ones that you can go back and revisit. You know, like the letter from Dad. I mean, I'm a True Colors coach for the 4 key personalities, and when you look at everything goes in these 4s. The 5th will be the rare people that are all 4 of the personalities. So when you're looking at 4 principles, 4 personalities, there's other type things that goes in the 4s. The simple philosophy, simple policies that we all can use. Again, it doesn't matter. It's a broad spectrum. It doesn't matter who, where, what you come from. The core philosophies. The other thing, a very big lesson in that is we actually have no idea if any of us are going to be alive tomorrow. We don't dwell on that, you know, because today is the day of the gift of living, and it's what
Sure.
we do in our day. And it's never, I did a wonderful show with someone on letter writing as a form of leaving your legacy, leaving your wishes and desires, but also a way of letting people know who you are. And we've got to not leave everything to the deathbed. You know, we've got to make sure we say these things and we share these things in our life, so that if our questions, people can come back to us, right? So, you know, don't treat every day as it's your last 24 hours, but maybe get on with it now, right? Because you don't know. You don't know what you've got going out there. Share that wisdom. It's not for you to hoard. You know, the coach of being the best teachers, yes, when you are a good coach and you're motivational and are teaching people to do it from the heart, from the passion, the technique is all one thing, but without the heart behind it. And every time you see in performances, people who have been technically trained, yes, that was perfectly technical, but I didn't feel the heart. I didn't feel the passion behind it, because they're so busy being correct that they've forgotten why they're doing it. And when somebody performs from the heart, the passion, the compassion of what it brings, you know, that is a whole new story. And that's what sets people apart. So it's a heavy dose of heart in there, a heavy dose to passion with whatever you bring. And you have a passionate coach that believes in the people that they're coaching, not just their ability, but who they are and to be the best they can be. Those skills that those kids learn will go through them for the rest of their life and everything that they do.
Sure, sure. I just, when you talked about the passion, I mentioned my two sons. They're grown adults. One is early 40s, the other just about to turn 40. Ironically, their passions, the older boy is a phenomenal drummer, percussionist, plays music. The younger son is in the Screen Actors Guild. He's an actor. But when I see them perform, every time I see them, I end up telling them afterwards, whatever you do in life, don't quit doing that, because you've got passion for what you're doing. The drummer, I mean, I can see it when he's on stage. He's just loving what he's doing. And the younger son, as an actor, whenever he's been and he's been in a couple HBO productions and so forth, and a couple on AMC network, I just tell him, I said, gosh, you are really good. And he said, well, Dad, I work at it. I've worked at this a long time. So there's so much truth to that. And bringing your heart, putting your heart into whatever it is you do is just so important, because that's how we touch other people's lives. And when we connect with each other emotionally, that changes people.
Oh,
that
100%.
Truly changes who they are. So,
going back to that lack of connection right in the beginning, we have to connect to ourselves inside, and then from the inside out, connect to others. And our biggest problem in the whole world is disconnect. And to talk about art, that's my daughter's art behind me. And and she's a social worker, and still looking to find her niche. But her art is a language on its own that always forms a conversation. And that's the thing, what we've got to understand. Art and performance isn't something frivolous. It is, the reason it's such a massive, big industry is that it's speaking to our joys, to our hopes, to our passions, to our problems, to society's problems. It is our poetry, it is our statement of being, and it is our leadership of where we can go and what we can become. It's our cheerleader. So the arts is exceptionally important. And another show I did, if you don't love what you're doing, you'll never do what you love. You've got to love what you're doing to do it well. Otherwise, it's just a job. And when you bring some love and passion into it, my God, it's not a job anymore. It's a conviction.
No, it's not. Absolutely. By the way, you had me talk about the other two books, but anybody that has an interest, my website is www.budboughton.com. They can read reviews of the books. I think for one or two of them, there might be excerpts, but they can order any of the books directly from my website. And I'd, be glad they can also contact me via that way. So if they want to get in touch with me, I'm always glad to talk with people that are thinking about the books or have read the book. I always like the feedback.
Just a conversation about it, right? Yes, because I mean, as I was reading the book, it was just as I said, it felt so relevant. There were the aha moments. There were the moments that were a reminder. There were moments like I'm completely in agreement, and I'm looking forward to it. I haven't had the time because of the move. To finish it, but I will be most certainly finishing it, and it's going to be one of those books on my bookshelf that every now and again I'll pick up. What do I need to know? And it will take me to a chapter that will be a reminder, and that's what it's about. So it's Bud.
Thank you.
Boughton, BOUGHTON.com.
Correct.
Excellent. And
cool.
And I would suggest. Christmas is coming up, folks. I know we're in September, but everybody's starting with the Christmas shopping. And instead of another frivolous tie or a useless gift, this book is something you can give as a gift that will keep on giving. And, I always say to people in shows like this is listen with some other people, have a conversation, pick up this book as a book club and read it, and then talk about how it relates to your life, how you can support one another in following through with it, how you can open up. I mean, one of the things in conversation we've got to be willing to do is speak vulnerability and leave persecution and judgment out. You have no right on that. Observation, encouragement, not letting people get stuck in their misery, but no judgment, no persecution. Allow people to be vulnerable, because in that vulnerability there is so much strength, there's so much courage, there is so much wisdom, and when we allow that to come out, we have no idea where that person's going to go. So this I think with people reading it and then sharing it will be a beautiful vulnerability that will come out that will empower them and all that they speak to. So it's a book club book, folks. It's a book club book, and it's a gift book that you need to give. And the other books too, the letters from Dad. There's so many different layers
Dad's
there.
last letter, right.
The last letter from Dad, and the not only the 4 key principles, but the entire philosophy is don't leave everything to the last 24 hours of your life. Say these things before you go. And of course, the coaching one is we all become a coach somewhere along the line. All of us, all of us are a teacher or a coach. We were there to celebrate, to support, to guide along the way. Our children, we're custodians of them. We don't own them. We're there as their coaches in life to coach them along into life. Sure. And when we do it with a passion, and when we do it from the heart, and we teach and encourage and celebrate their achievements, look at what we're creating in them and what they will become because of it. So get all 3 books and read them yourself, and then gift them out to other people, because these are truly, they're little light bulb moments, just simplicity. It's no high complexity. It's relatable, and it's something that really does speak very simply and very coherently and very much intimately to us. So it's get all 3 of them. Thank you, Bud, and for the book. I just got a little more to go on it, and I'm looking forward to doing that. I mean, I'm one of these people, when I sit down and read a book, leave me alone. Hours spent on a book. I can't just kind of go in and do a few pages. I get lost in it, so I'm looking forward to that time to doing that. And I will definitely be referring to it along as I need inspiration and information. And, I think this is a wonderful gift that you've given, and I'm so glad you had a redirect in your life to go along this road. If you look at your thread, it's always about your own inquisitiveness, your own adventurings of what does this mean? But it's also been in your allowing. You have allowed yourself to take the journey without dictating what the journey should be. And in that self-discovery, have discovered things that now have become tools and of service to others, which is exactly what self-discovery is all about. So thank you for taking the journey.
Well, Sara, just in my closing comment, first of all, thank you for taking the time to read the book. And thank you so much for asking me to be on your program. I am honored to be part of your Orchard of Wisdom, I believe you called it, or whatever. That is so cool. And I hope that anybody that listens or watches this gets something positive from it. And hopefully, if they choose to read the book, they'll also glean some insights that will be beneficial to them. So thank you very much.
Oh, they will. They will. Anybody who truly sits down and reads the book, they will. And as I said, it's a book club book. It's a gift book. It's a book the family needs to read. It's one of those books that just needs to be in the library, that's there for anybody to pick up at any time that they need to read it. So it's one of those books, most certainly. And the other 2 sound like it too, and I'm looking forward to getting those as well. So thank you so much, Bud. It's been a delight to have you here today. And thank you for writing these books. Thank you for taking that journey. And letting your own self-discovery lead you down this path that, serves other people, because that's what it's all about. So thank you for joining us here on selfdiscoveryradiotv.com. This is under the Author's Kiss genre. And truly, folks, his journey is a gift to you that he has put down in books. And these books will be a gift of guidance that not only will help your life, but help the lives of those around you. And so it's a gift that keeps on giving. So until next time, folks, bye for now. For more wonderful shows like this, please go to selfdiscoveryradio.com, podcasts, and see our lineup. And if you wish to support us, we have a funded button. Please stay tuned for our next show.